Okay, completing the square. Okay. I know it was somewhat of a confusing video because completing the square is somewhat confusing at first. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty good. Like I said in the previous video, though, there's not a whole lot of times that I'm going to be showing you completing the square. You will be tested on it, so you will need to know the process of it. Do yourself a favor. Double check your work through using the quadratic formula or the inspection method if you have to. But if I'm asking for completing the square, I need you to show me the steps on completing the square. Okay, multiple choice test though, not so much, but I need you to understand that process. So there are two that I'm going to have you try, but I want to work this one with you for now. Now, the first step I need to do is I've got to get rid of C. I've got to move it to the other side. So I'm going to add 34 to both sides. Okay. What's happening here is I'm eliminating this thing, and I'm going to leave a space here. So I'm going to do a better job of doing it now. So I'm left with r squared plus 20r, and then I've got a box here, or a square. Okay, so we'll get into this now. And then that's going to equal 44, okay? But then there's going to be another box here, because there's going to be something I have to do to that. This is really why it's called completing the square, because I have to complete the two empty places. A number has to go in both of those things. What I do is I take the b term, and I divide it by 2. And I get 10. But I square that term. I square 10 now. So it's going to be 10 squared. So this is going to be 100. What I'm doing is I'm adding 100 into both of the boxes. Okay? So 100 is going to go here. Make sure you put the plus because it was a positive. And then put a plus here as well. All right? I'm going to go here. Yeah, I'll go over here. Step next is I'm going to rewrite my equation. R squared plus 20r plus 100 okay, equals 144. Now, I need to factor the left side. Okay, so I can use inspection, I can use the quadratic formula. I'm going to use inspection because I know that R is 1, or A is 1 here. So I know I have to break it up into R and R again. What two factors of 100 can I manipulate adding or subtracting to get to 20? Well, I know 10 times 10 is 100, and 10 plus 10 is 20. So I know I'm going to use 10 twice here, and I know they both have to be plus, because I've got pluses all over the place. And that's going to equal 144. Now, this is the tricky part. If I have the difference here that's the same thing twice, I need to rewrite that saying that. These two lines say the same exact thing. This is squared just like this was, right? Because that's how it would FOIL out if I saw the little 2 here in the exponent. Now I can solve the entire thing for r by taking the square root of both sides. Oftentimes, what you see over here is going to be a perfect square. Oftentimes, but not all the time. Okay? So then I'm left with r plus 10 equals 12. But remember that that's a plus or a minus 12 because I took the square root of a number. And not only is 12 times 12 144, but negative 12 times negative 12 is also 144. So I'm going to have to do this both ways because remember, we're talking about quadratics here. There are 2 zeros or 2 roots. So I know my first root has to be r equals 2. But if I have a subtraction here, and this is a negative, I'm subtracting by 10 on both sides, and I'm going to have a negative 22 as my other r value. Now, make your life easy. Check it using the quadratic formula, or use inspection method. How to do that? Well, here's what I can do. The original equation was r squared plus 20r minus 34 equals 10. Rather than using completing the square, oops, bad angle. Rather than using completing the square here and moving c over to the other side, move 10 over here and then solve it just by using regular quadratic formula or inspection. So what I'm saying is subtract 10 on both sides, and then you're left with something that's a little bit neater. R squared plus 20r minus 44 equals 0. And then, with this being equal to 0, now I can use the other two methods that I like a lot more than completing the square. But understand the steps. Hopefully this is what was the confusing part before. Now it's not. Okay, because I'm really completing the square, I'm filling in the 2 spots on either side of the equal sign, because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. That's why I have to add it to both sides, or subtract it. It's not going to be subtracted because I'm squaring it. Work it out like that. Now, on your fever form, there are 3 questions. They all have quadratics that are a greater than 1. Don't do that just now. We'll work that more in class. So do these 2 problems instead, okay? I'll show you the answer key as soon as I get over there. Some other questions are the big ideas that were on the fever, though. What is completing the square? We just did it. What is the purpose of using this method? To annoy you? Yeah. No. You need to know all the methods of solving a quadratic because there are times when you're going to be asked to do that. It is a standard you need to know this year. What are the steps? Right there. What is the square? Bam. That's the square. And what happens when a isn't 1? What do you do? Well, think about it. What would you do? There's a couple things you could do. You could factor out whatever that factor was. So, for instance, if I had here, let's say it was 3, or let's make it easier. Let's say it was 2n squared instead of n squared. I could just pull 2 out of everything. Like factor 2 out and then work your way through. That's probably what I would do. But the way I'll show you is just go ahead and solve it regularly. Instead of using the inspection method when you get to this line, though, like we did, I'd probably use the quadratic formula. Because if that was a 2 there, I would want to put this into the quadratic formula instead of guessing like for a million years on inspection. Okay. That's why we use the quadratic formula anyway, because I don't want to have to guess forever to make the numbers fit using the inspection method. Try the 3 on the paper if you want to. I don't have the answers right off the top of my head, so I'm not giving them to you. Here, though, let me give you the answers to number 1 and number 2, and then we'll talk about it more in class on Friday. Okay. So nice, easy numbers. You shouldn't have had too bad of a time with that. Number 1, n is 13 and negative 3, and for number 2, x is 6 and negative 14. Okay. So use other methods. If you're not great with this, use another method that you're better at, and then it'll work out nicely for you. Okay? Out. Goodbye.